Good Thursday afternoon to you. It's a little bit after 4, but still time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. A little later in the show, Sam Amico, hoopswire.com, will be along, and we'll talk plenty about that first-round matchup between the Cavaliers and the Knicks. Really the most exciting first-round matchup of the NBA playoffs. We begin, though, by talking Browns football. This comes from Yahoo Sports, and it's kind of interesting. So it's one move that each AFC team wishes it had back or will wish it had back in the future. For the Browns, they say the Deshaun Watson deal. From a strictly football standpoint, trade and compensation were outrageous, considering that Watson was never among the very top tier of NFL quarterbacks and hadn't played since 2 seasons prior. With that, let's welcome in Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, it's kind of interesting. The narrative nationally is very different than the narrative locally. I don't think the Browns would have any hesitation making the same deal they made with Deshaun Watson.
You know, I would love to talk to this writer and ask him, what's your definition of top tier of NFL quarterback play? Because the last time Deshaun Watson played a full season, he had MVP votes. So if that's not top tier, then I don't know what is. And if we're going to, again, you cannot like Deshaun Watson, but we can't rewrite history just because you don't like the player, right? And that's what we're doing here. The idea that Deshaun Watson was never at the very top of the NFL, he was at that conversation with a young Patrick Mahomes before Joe Burrow entered the conversation. It's been 2 years. The gamble is he still somebody that's going to go up to that conversation? But acting as if, you just paid Kirk Cousins this money, which is what this article is basically trying to say. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and, again, a lot of people are nitpicking the year that he had because it was a 4-12 team. I've seen people saying, they were down all the time. Defenses, 5,000 yards is 5,000 yards. I mean, it's not like you get 80% of the yardage.
Well, I mean, and also, if we want to do this, okay, let's do this with Justin Herbert too. Right, who hasn't had the winning success on the field that you would assume for a quarterback who gets talked about as one of the elite ones in the NFL. We're even trying to throw Trevor Lawrence in there after 6 good games this year. The idea that Deshaun Watson, it's crazy if the Browns even offered his money. It's revisionist history, and it's only it only works if you view things in such a vacuum that does not exist, because you can write it like that, but that's not how things happen with Deshaun Watson and the player that he was before this. Again, you could be critical of Deshaun, but let's not rewrite history in order to make your criticism sting a little bit more, because all that's going to do is make the people writing these articles look silly.
Yeah, especially if what happens on the field is what the Browns think will happen on the field. I know you've addressed this in Untitled Unfiltered. Do you think Nick Chubb's due for, a kind of a breakout year, if you will?
I think he's due for a very efficient year. And we talk a lot about the offense changing. And again, offseason conversations tend to happen at absolutes where we think, oh, this guy's going to move to slot. He's only going to play 100% of his snaps in the slot. Where the conversation with football is much more nuanced. Are the Browns going to throw the ball more? Yeah. Does that mean Nick Chubb's not going to have a part in it? Probably no. Nick Chubb's definitely going to have a part in this offensive game, and he might actually be able to get more carries because they're relying on running the ball less. And what I mean by that is you're not going to rotate in and out Nick Chubb with Kareem Hunt, because that's what you've been doing when you've been relying on running the football as much as the Cleveland Browns have. Now you can have Nick Chubb out there more often because you're not asking him to run the ball 7 or 8 times a drive. You can have him out there almost on every drive instead of it being, hey, Nick Chubb has to run this drive, then Kareem Hunt comes back in. So I think a lot of the assumptions of Nick Chubb are kind of done without the benefits of being put in that system. And also, Nick Chubb's probably going to benefit from being on the field more consistently in more consistent spots since he's not going to be being rotated out as much as he was with Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, and the other thing, the carries he gets should not be as heavy a load on him, because I don't think you're going to see nearly as many 8- and 9-man boxes. I think you're going to see some lighter boxes, which means you're not getting beat on by defensive linemen as much.
Yeah, if the Browns have more success on first down, they should definitely not be stuck in those 8-man, 9-man boxes. Where you do get stuck in that, no matter what the personnel is or the quarterback is when you get stuck in short yardage situations. That's why you have Deshaun Watson in there, to get you to more 2nd and 1s, right? Where teams are more confused on what they're going to do on that down defensively. So, yeah, Nick Chubb should benefit from that as well.
All right, this from Dog Pound Daily. 3 Browns who won't be missed, so they will not be missed in 2023. Number 3, they say Kareem Hunt. Number 2, edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney. And number 1, safety John Johnson. Yeah, neither of the 3 had the kind of year that the Browns expected them to a season ago, without question. And I think of the 3, Clowney was probably the most disappointing.
Yeah, Clowney. I would say actually John Johnson. I don't think Clowney was as disappointing on the field as he was off the field, like with everything else that happened with him. But on the field, he was actually kind of solid. Like gave you a good PFF grade. Was still a solid run defender. The sacks weren't there, but we know with Clowney, the sacks are never there with Clowney. That's not why you bring in Jadeveon Clowney. Is if you want like an insanely high sack total. But the what he brought and when he played, I thought he was fine. John Johnson, on the other hand, I think maybe you can even put this more towards Kareem Hunt being the most disappointing player here, because you were expecting a lot out of Kareem Hunt. You didn't get very much, if anything at all, out of Kareem Hunt this year. I mean, he was kind of a footnote to the whole season most of the years, outside of like a couple of games where he showed some bursts.
Yeah, Clowney, you paid him $10 million or $12 million, and you got 2 sacks. And I know that's not what he does, but that could have gone, that money could have gone a lot of other places, like along the line at defensive tackle.
Yeah, I would argue that you probably would have a hard time getting the production. Well, not the production, but the play out of somebody from $10 million that you got out of Jadeveon, because we're not talking about a ton of money there for him. Like, I think it was like 9.85. So it's like, you can make the argument that he might have been the biggest disappointment on the field, but like when he played, I think outside of sack numbers, he played decently. Kareem Hunt and John Johnson, there's no real argument that they played well at all. Like, John Johnson was detrimental to the defense at times with his inability to tackle. Kareem Hunt killed drives. Jadeveon Clowney wasn't the problem on the defense. Like, those 2 were problems with their respective side of the ball.
All right, one burning question for all 32 NFL teams. This is from NFL.com. For the Browns, have the Browns succeeded in bringing their front 7 up to snuff? And you see some of the additions that are listed there: Hurst, Okunrankwo, Tomlinson. Taki comes back. That's going to be an important question. If they have, it goes a long way towards curing what was a big problem a year ago.
Yeah, the real question is, did you put enough around Myles Garrett, right? Because Myles Garrett is going to be the reason this thing sinks or swims. And if that's enough to have around him to where he can still be a very productive player, then you're ultimately going to be fine. If it's not, then, it's going to be a problem there. A lot of this stuff on the defensive line in the front 7 could be solved with better strategic placement of these players and what you're asking them to do. And you see it all the time where teams don't really change that much personnel but get dramatically different play out of their defensive lines just because they do some scheme shifts and have guys do what they're good at. So I think it will be enough. A lot of this is going to rest on the shoulders of Myles Garrett. A lot of this is going to rest on the shoulders of Jim Schwartz, but I think that's enough.
All right, before we go to break, Chris Sims, Pro Football Talk, about what the Browns need to improve heading into the draft.
they're not far off, like we discussed a lot, right, Mike? I mean, their team, they got some parts about them where you go, damn, there's a lot to like, right? We know the O-line's good. I don't really look offensively to go anything's like glaring right there right now. I think it's all defense. They've changed what they're going to do here. Jim Schwartz is the new D coordinator. So there's two spots that jump out to me, Mike, and they're both defense related. One, pass rusher, something obvious, opposite of a Myles Garrett. I don't know if there's really a presence there right now that you can really look at. So that's like one that jumps out to me. And then the other one is linebacker, right? Linebacker, they got JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He's a smaller type of linebacker, right? But after that, it's guys that are, solid players, but nothing special. They got Anthony Walker back on a 1-year deal, right? So I think linebacker's probably the one I look at to go, they need something there for sure. But it's one of those two positions, Mike, at least for my money.
So, Quincy, what are your thoughts? I could see where that would be a concern.
I can see where it could be a concern with linebacker, but like in modern football, linebackers are just getting kind of like not phased out completely, but it's just not as important as it used to be. And it kind of feels like not having like a big name at running back. As long as you're solid at that position, I don't think there's much to gain out of having the best linebacking room in the NFL. And I don't think there's that much more to lose with having the worst linebacking room in the NFL. You just kind of want to be average there, not spend a ton of money, maybe have a playmaker there or two. But we have seen teams have very average defenses with some of the best linebackers in football. Just look no further than the Colts this year, who were very average with Shaq Leonard back there. Like, the linebacker position is not the game-changing position it used to be when the game was played a different way. Now that it is, and it's more, spread them out, throw the ball more, it just matters less how good you are at linebacker. And I think that's something where I could see why people would be concerned about that. But I also think if you look at all 32 teams outside of like 5 of them, you would have that same concern with almost every NFL team, because this is just a trend of where they're going. I don't think the position is as valued as some still think it is.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out of the side of the break. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greeny Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at greenysportscards.com.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I still feel like we can add 2 or 3, more so 2 defensive tackles in this year's draft. The one person that I was really looking at was Keandre Coburn out of Texas. I just think that his power and his size is just something to really look at. He's a big guy. He shed block. He creates pressure. And I think that's really what we need. And I think in a Jim Schwartz defense, I think it's going to be immaculate to really see him and Perrion and just all these defensive tackles that's going to get after the ball and going to stop the run, because majority of these teams that we're going to face, they're going to be run heavy. And we need big guys that are going to stop the run from the inside. So, yeah, go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy, your thoughts on Coburn. The other thing I guess we should say is, where they're picking in the 3rd and 4th rounds, I don't know that you're going to get somebody who can come in and make an immediate impact. You're looking for guys that you think you can develop into starters next year, end of this year. But thoughts about Coburn?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Coburn at this point because there's so many bodies in this draft to learn. All I will say is at this point of the draft that the Browns are starting in, which is 72, you are making more or less educated guesses at that point. We have no idea who's going to be available at 72. After the first, 40 picks in the draft. And honestly, sometimes in some drafts, after the first 25 picks, everybody's draft board goes out the window. Whoever you think might be a third, fourth round pick, that's all kind of like pseudoscience of how we try to guess this. It's not ever really accurate. So we don't know who's going to really be available at that point. Just have places where you want emphasis on, and then know where you want to take those aims at. And that's why the Browns have all these guardrails for that, so they know what type of player, prospect do they want to look at to bring in. So maybe he's going to be somebody that the Browns look at. Maybe it's somebody else that you've not heard of or not done any draft prep on. The range of possibilities here for the Browns in the draft are probably going to be pretty hard to put our finger on. This isn't like the mock drafts in the first round where we have like 5 or 6 guys we know the Browns want to target. This is a completely different game here.
All right, along those lines, another name that's kind of associated with the Browns, Baylor defensive tackle Siaki Ika. He has visited with the Steelers, Falcons, Lions, Browns, and met individually with the Eagles. Now, Mike Renner is from Pro Football Focus. This is from the PFF NFL show. On the ideal scenario, what he feels the ideal scenario is for the Browns at 74.
So 74, the one guy I would really want to add to this defense is Siaki Ika. I want a guy who can eat up space. They were like the lightest front in the league last year, and it showed in the run game. A dreadful, just abysmal showing last year because they didn't have the horses, right? They were throwing out, 300-pound nose tackles last year. And they tried to obviously fix that. Dalvin Tomlinson, they added free agency. Good start. Can't stop there, in my opinion. That's why Siaki Ika, one of the few true 330-plus nose tackles. He's not like the greatest hold-the-point nose tackle prospect, which is why he's not, getting top 50 hype or anything like that. But just some size in there to just create a little movement in the run game is something they desperately need. So I think someone like Siaki Ika, you put him in next to Dalvin Tomlinson, your run game transforms overnight, in my opinion.
And Quincy, that again, Ika is the guy we've heard of. You've seen some of them. I like the thought process. I like a big guy that's going to eat up some space.
Yeah, I don't mind the thought process there. I'm just not a big fan of that player in particular. Like, I just don't think he's as good as everybody says he is. Not big guy, not physical. I don't love big, not physical guys. Like, what's the point of being that big if you're not physical? So I don't see it with him. I don't think he's going to be the run, especially when it comes to run stuffing. Like, that's not something that I feel comfortable handing a player of the ability to run stuff when I don't see the physicality. And at 330 pounds, if you can't run stuff, I don't know what you're going to be doing out here, because you're definitely not pass rushing. I'm not a big fan of him. I know that others are big fans of him from what I've seen. And look, it's not like I haven't looked through all 4 years of his college. But from what I've seen, I'm not a huge fan of that prospect. And honestly, when you look at run stuffers in the NFL these days, since the game has gotten so much more athletic in just a short number of years, these guys are no longer the 300-pound, Vince Wilfork, Big Daddy Sean Rogers builds anymore. Like, how often do we really see that in the modern NFL? Because now the run stuffers look like DeForest Buckner, right? They're long and they're strong, and that's who usually gets to plug up all the gaps there. So I think I think this is like drafting a post center in the modern NBA, right? There's not really that much use for a dude like that anymore. There's not really the team that uses the giant guy. And look, you look at even Pittsburgh, who wasted Javon Hargraves for how many years, using him as a zero tech when he was much better as a 3. So the idea of getting the big guy in there to hold 2 guys, that just doesn't happen anymore, or as much, or as useful as I think it some people still think.
So this is from ESPN.com, and it's what we're hearing about the Browns draft. And they say defensive tackle, clear area of need for the Browns, but don't count them out of adding another wide receiver. Jake Trotter suggests that they want more speed at the position, while the trade for Elijah Moore currently helps. More verticality, ability down the field is seen as a key missing element. Again, another snapshot, and I understand both thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're at the point in the draft, too, where, like, if you think somebody could help or you think somebody has a chance of developing into something, why not take a chance, right? We're not drafting players who start this year. None of these draft picks should start this year. If they do, somebody got injured or horribly underperformed at camp. Or maybe we got lucky and got, like, a really good player. But the odds of these dudes that we draft this year starting should be very small. And you shouldn't want that many of them starting. So if that's the case, you're more than okay taking guys who are going to be a little bit more projects, taking guys who are going to take a couple years. And if that's the case, nothing you have on your roster stops you from taking somebody you think could develop into something.
Yep, I agree with you wholeheartedly again. All right, we're going to go back to Mike Renner, the guy we just heard from about Ika. This is his idea pick for the Browns at number 98, and it's an edge rusher.
My second pick for them, pick 98, I gave them another defensive lineman. I think you really have to foolproof this run game. Give yourself guys you know who can be solid options there. Okoronkwo's not a plus run defender. Alex Wright, they wanted him to be that last year, the third rounder out of UAB. Yeah. But, man, rookie year, he is just stiff. I'm not certain. He's on his point in the developmental curve because he came out early out of UAB and was really just not ready for the NFL. I'm not so certain year two is going to see a big turnaround. Maybe it is, but I think, again, I'm trying to foolproof, make sure that I have options in case he's not. And to me, Isaiah McGuire from Missouri is that option that I know he can set the edge of the run game. Is he ever going to be an elite pass rusher? Probably not. But I do think that you give yourself at least a high floor player there so that you're, again, really focused on the run game here because that was your Achilles heel.
And again, that's a guy that various mock drafts have the Browns being interested in. Your thoughts on McGuire?
Yeah, me and Pro Football Focus tend to disagree on defensive line because I don't think numbers can really dictate who's going to be a good interior defensive lineman. I think a lot of that has to do with mentality and physicality at the point of attack and just an outright willingness to fight. And again, this is where me and Pro Football Focus tend to disagree because, again, they told you last year that they thought Alex Wright would be somebody who would be able to do that, where I disagree. So it's a fundamental disagreement between me and the source here. But, yeah, I just think look for guys who are more physical than guys who spark more often or have these high RAS scores. Like, the physicality will really lead you in the right direction when it comes to the defensive tackle position, in my opinion.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, take a look at Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah getting fired up for the upcoming season, plus a look at a couple of different mock drafts. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah getting ready to try to make an impact for the Browns this season.
I keep watching and seeing number 28, and there are times when he hits like a linebacker, there are times when he covers like a safety, and he has the speed of a cornerback.
Our intention is still to win, still to work hard, and still to execute. You say you be where the shooters be. I be where the shooters be. Coaches ain't nothing new to me, that's the best place to recruit for me. Sometimes I move with 20 men. Sometimes
the tight end football is loose. Conklin, another nice punch out by JOK. We'll give it on the ground. Third and short, White will not get
God
there.
is my witness. He said, why it seem like the violence just won't stop. Pay attention.
Cleveland has got it. And Owusu Koromoa comes up with a huge play. Here's Cook. And Owusu Koromoa makes a big play again.
Keep it. Ain't no time to waste. If it ain't about growth, you can count me
throws.
out. Look,
Incomplete.
people know it's fake. Love how you outlast all the phonies and outlast all the snakes. Feds be out here killing us, then making brothers catch the case. That's why we gotta stand on business,
Second
brothers.
17. There's a beautiful knockaway by the linebacker Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa. Big time play right there.
One sound. Together we stand, divided we fall. It's the Almighty God. Yes, sir.
Carter is blown up. Owusu Koromoa on a tackle for the Browns.
Quincy, JOK is one of the guys that I really am anxious to see because of the style of player. He's an instinctive guy that has really good athletic ability, and I think guys like that thrive in what Jim Schwartz does on defense.
Yeah, and I think he suffered the most from the free-for-all on defense that happened in the second half of the season. If you look at his numbers, he actually started out the year pretty good. And then after Anthony Walker went down, that's when his numbers started to kind of take a nose dive. And I think that was because now that the communication has broken down, everybody's just kind of doing what they feel like they need to do. And when everybody is doing what they feel like they need to do, that means you can't really predict what's going on around you. And instinctive guys rely on the other pieces in that defense being where they're supposed to be in order for me to make a play on the ball, right? Ed Reed was relying on a lot of the other guys to be in their spots, to be able to take the ball away and get into a spot where he wasn't supposed to be, because, again, that's where those instincts are the most useful. If you put Troy Polamalu on a defense where everybody's doing whatever they want, he's not going to look like Troy, right? You need to put him on a very disciplined defense and surround him with very disciplined pieces for him to shine. That's the same thing with JOK. And I think now that there's going to be a little bit more trust in what everybody's being asked to do in the defense, he's going to be able to make those instinctive plays and not have to worry about are three other guys doing the same thing or doing their own thing, or is everybody just working off vibes right now? Because that was really the problem with the defense in the second half. Nobody could trust where anybody would be, so that meant nobody could trust what they were doing.
So this is, again, from ESPN.com. What would be a successful draft for the Browns is the question. Browns still need to add depth, notably defensive end, defensive tackle, and linebacker. Getting help in those spots, both in the short term and long term, would make this draft successful for the Browns. I don't know short term, but yeah, those are areas, and I think you could throw linebacker and probably running back and probably offensive tackle in there as well.
Yeah, you can throw a lot of positions into that pie there. Like it's really never ending. But there's a lot to say. I will say when it comes to that, again, the Browns is going to depend on when they do and what they do better this year.
Yep. All right, this from Althon.com, 3-round mock draft. So the Browns, they have the Browns going with 2 defensive linemen. So 74, Tuipulotu and USC defensive lineman. Then at 98, they have him come back and taking Zach Harrison. And again, those are kind of interesting guys. Harrison is one of those guys that I'm curious to see what his NFL career looks like. He's got all the measurables you want to see. He's fast, he's strong, he's big, and for some reason doesn't do what you would hope he does on the football field.
Yeah, Zach Harrison's one of those players where people are still trying to figure out, right? Because he's 6'6" and 271, but he's a good athlete for somebody that size. He's not necessarily the athlete you need him to be that size at edge, even at the college position. Now, he's super young, 21 years old, there could be a lot that changes with him. And then, like I mentioned, the way that the NFL's moving with run stuffers, these dudes are usually really long. He's long at 6'6". So the hope for me would be, hey, if you move this guy to 3-tech, you might have something there because he looks more like a 3-tech. He plays more like a 3-tech. But there's a reason that move was never made at Ohio State. And if only the people on that coaching staff know why that move was never made.
Yeah. And what do you think about the defensive lineman from, and again, that's the second or third mock draft that I've seen with Tui Lutu, who's going to the Browns at that pick. Again, it's a big guy. And I know you probably don't know a whole lot about him, but I think he's a little more physical than the last guy we talked about.
Oh, no, I watched a lot of USC this year. I'm familiar with that defense and familiar enough to know I'm good. I'm good off anybody in that defense. I have watched them ruin many of Caleb Williams' great performances by how untrustworthy that defense was across the board, especially on the defensive line. They do have a couple of players who might be good outside that situation. Tuilopo, I don't feel like it's somebody who's going to move the needle either way there. He's kind of just the dude there. But yeah, I'm good. I've seen enough in that USC. Watch that game against North Texas or Tulane or whoever it was that they lost to in a bowl game.
It was Tulane, and Tajay Spears is going in the College Football Hall of Fame based on his...
Tajay Spears moved up a whole round based off of that defense.
Yeah.
Like, I would just be hesitant.
All right. 5 players the Browns can select in 2023 draft to replace Kareem Hunt. This from Dog Pound Daily. They go 5, Israel Epiganka from Pittsburgh. Number 4, Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State. Number 3, Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina. Number 2, the aforementioned Tajay Spears from Tulane. And number 1, Rashawn Johnson from Texas. And Johnson's an intriguing guy because he's spent most of his career behind Bijan Robinson, who's might be the only first-round running back selected. When you look at those names, anybody there jump out as somebody you think would fit in with what the Browns are looking for?
Everybody but Israel. I like all 4 of those guys. When it comes to the running back position, too, that's one of those positions where you want to see production because the intangibles of that position, in order to get some of that production, tells you a lot about that player. Deuce Vaughn is somebody I think could be useful in limited roles. I know everybody sees the smaller running back, but I think of him as a lot like Dion Lewis, somebody who could be really useful in that game. Tajay Spears is somebody I like a lot coming out of Tulane. The 7 yards a carry tells me he has very good vision. And Rashawn Johnson is somebody who I think a lot of people are actually sleeping on. Might be, I don't want to say just as good as Bijan, but he's not far off from Bijan. And Bijan's really, really good. And also he has less carries. And again, Nick Chubb kind of got him on that same discount that Rashawn on, where everybody thought it was Sony. And you might want to just check out the backup. You know what I mean?
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, Browns free agent season in roster building was pretty good. Should fans buy the hype? We'll talk about that. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. So, Quincy, by most people's accounts, Browns have been one of the top teams at addressing needs and plugging holes and doing things in free agency. We kind of heard some of that stuff before. Why do you think should fans buy the hype? Why or why not?
I don't think it's hype. I think it's expectations, right? Like, should this team be good? This team were in any other city, the answer would be yes, they should be good. They better be good, right? And that's the point. That's the expectation. It's not hype. I'm not hyping them up. I'm telling you, they should be this good. If they're not that good, then things got to change. But that's the expectation. Hype is when I'm like, oh, everybody go to the moon, all this stuff. No, either they're good this year or people get fired because they should be good. And there's no excuse for them not to be good.
The other thing that I would say that's a little different is you have different coaching. I think I would assume that Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone were good hires, and they get more than what our previous special teams coordinator and defensive coach got out of them. Otherwise, why do we get rid of those two guys?
They should be better, right? Like, they should be better. A lot of this is a projection, but I don't think this is, and none of this is projection that happens because it's unwarranted. We're projecting this on Bubba Ventrone because he's been a good special teams coordinator. We're projecting this on Jim Schwartz because he's been a great defensive coordinator. We're projecting this on Kevin Stefanski because he's had one of the best offenses in the NFL, and he's had a playoff run before. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. There is nothing we're projecting these players to do that individually most of them have not done before. This is not hype. This is an expectation. Things need to be reached this year. Doesn't mean we're entitled to wins, but it does mean that that's the expectation, is that this team's got to be much better than last year.
Yeah, and that's fair. Expectation versus hype. That's well said. All right, this is kind of interesting. So this is a 2018 draft do-over by the 33rd team. They have the Browns selecting Josh Allen with the first overall pick. They have the Giants taking Lamar Jackson at number 2. They have the Browns taking Bradley Chubb at number 4. They have the Cardinals getting Denzel Ward at 10. The Dolphins getting Nick Chubb at 11. And the Vikings taking Wyatt Teller at 30. Baker Mayfield was not taken in the first round. But the Browns, so the Browns, I know. So the Browns still have 3 guys in the top 30 in Ward, Chubb, and Teller. And they missed on the number 1 overall.
What Baker Mayfield do to deserve that? We knew he wasn't in there. We had to say it. But yeah, I honestly would prefer just taking Denzel Ward at 4 over Bradley Chubb. I'm not a big Bradley Chubb guy. I would have rather, you just stuck with the original there, or even just Nick Chubb. But yeah, the Browns did a good job of not only drafting in that class, but developing talent that they did not draft in that draft class. And that's one of those draft classes that were really well done. And it better have been. You had the 1st and 4th pick overall. You know what I mean? Like, you better have had a good draft if that's the case.
But you missed on number 1. That's kind of that. It's a $230 million.
It's understandable if you miss on a quarterback. Yeah, I will say that.
Yeah, that's fair.
If you swing and miss on a quarterback, and it's not like it wasn't like Cam Newton came out that year and we took blame.
That's fair.
Right? Like, it was a 50, it was a 20, it was even odds amongst all of them. And honestly, the 2 that panned out were the ones that we thought had the least amount of odds. Everybody thought it was either going to be Sam Darnold or that Baker was going to be the more ready-to-go guy there. And it just didn't turn out that way. So I can give you a pass for going number 1 overall and missing on a quarterback, because I'd rather have you miss on a quarterback at number 1 overall than never take one in those spots. And we keep ending up with like Brandon Wheaton and Johnny Manziel and what was it, Deshaun Kaiser we took in the second round one year, and keep reeling out that level of prospects. We're giving Cody Kessler a chance. Like, for 20 years we did that. I would have rather they did what they did there. Obviously, it would have been great if they would have took the good one in Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. But you can live with a miss at quarterback. Well, you couldn't live if you missed on like a DB there at number 4, though.
But that explains to you why the Haslams and Andrew Berry gave up all the draft capital and paid $230 million because they hadn't been able to address it. They've been trying to address it. Now they addressed it.
It's like when Deshaun Watson gets involved, it breaks our brains to the point that we forget that quarterback's the most important position in this whole sport, right? Like we forget that just having a good one changes everything. Why did we think we stink for the last 20-something years? Because we didn't have a single lick of decent quarterback play in that 20 years. And the second we get something mediocre, not even like good, just mediocre, we lose our minds because that's how important that position is. So, of course, it's going to be expensive just to take a chance at that spot. And it's worth it every time because you got to be able to take swings at it in order to get it.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage, always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to the Cavs, getting ready for a playoff series. Home court advantage against the Knicks. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Straight ahead, stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greeny Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at greenysportscards.com.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We turn our attention to the Cavs getting ready for Game 1 of the playoff series against the Knicks Saturday, 6 o'clock, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Cavs and Knicks played March 31st, so just a couple weeks ago. New York put up 130 on the Cavs' NBA best defense. J.B. Bickerstaff talked about what they learned from that last meeting.
That's not the way that we want to play. We have to do a better job of dictating pace. Obviously in that game, without Jarrett, without Evan, two of your best defensive players, that Jarrett and Isaac, without Jarrett and Isaac, that allowed them, some guys to get free, and it changed some of the things that we did defensively, and that, attributed to some of the pace. But I do think because we were scoring so easy in that first quarter, we just thought that we would continue to score and let our defense get away from us. Right. Well, and that's part of the reason why we try to control the tempo, is because a lot of times when you're doing this, it's the big guys that get lost in the game, right? Because they don't have the opportunity to do both and get involved on both sides of the floor.
And with that, let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. And Sam, when I heard J.B. Bickerstaff talk about that, you can be sure Tom Thibodeau wants to do that as much as he can because he wants no part of Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley in the half court.
Yeah, that's the thing, and we heard Coach Bickerstaff allude to that Jarrett Allen didn't play that game. Obviously, no Isaac Okoro either. His status for Game 1's iffy, but if the Cavs play the type of defense that there's probably 3 or 4 games that they didn't play the type of defense they've been playing all regular season where they led the league in defense. That was one of those games. So, thankfully it was a regular season game, and it did teach the Cavs, as J.B. Bickerstaff said, that you can't just run up and down the court and try to outscore the Knicks. You're going to have to, lock down like the Cavs normally do. It was almost better that they lost that game when you go into a series. That way you're not feeling overconfident. And I think that they learned their lesson and will be more in tune with playing the type of Cavs basketball that they played all regular season because of that game.
When you look at playoff series, a lot of times it comes down to matchups. What matchups are you looking at as being keys to the Cavs-Knicks series?
A big one obviously is going to be Mitchell against Jalen Brunson. Garland will also take a shot at Brunson. Isaac Okoro, if he's presumably healthy, and it sounds like he's getting close, will also take kind of some shots at cracks at him at Brunson as well. Brunson is the guy who put up all those points in Cleveland on March 31st. You're going to be very cognizant of him. They always, Mike Brown, the old former Cavs coach, now coach the Kings, used to call it the head of the snake, which means the point guard. If you can disrupt him and disrupt Brunson, who handles the ball quite a bit for the Knicks, then you're really disrupting their entire offense by just kind of containing and limiting one guy. Obviously, a huge matchup is going to be Evan Mobley with Julius Randle. Randle obviously has had a sprained ankle, played all 77 and started all 77 of the Knicks' first 77 games, missed the last 5 with sprained ankle. His status for game 1 is iffy. That said, he will probably come back, we presume, at some point in this series, if not game 1. And now you have Evan Mobley, who's a rookie to the playoffs, is going to have to defend, an all-star power forward in Randle. So those are going to be two really key matchups, two guys that you're really going to have to pay attention to on the Knicks. And let's not forget R.J. Hampton, the Knicks shooting guard, small forward type, who can hurt you as well. And Isaac Okoro is going to get plenty of time, as is Karis LeVert, trying to slow down Hampton as well. So those are the main matchups to watch. Obviously there's going to be all kinds of matchups all over the court, but those are the 3 big ones.
The other thing that you look at is, the benches, and bench scoring favors the Knicks. It just does. Emmanuel Quigley has a legitimate shot at being the NBA's 6th man. So J.B. Bickerstaff was asked, what does he need from his bench to be successful in this series?
Just some consistency, and again, it's not doing anything more than you're capable of. We have guys that we believe in that can contribute and can help, and they just have to be themselves. And if they play to their standard, we'll be just fine.
What do you consider their standard?
Each individual guy is different. You know what I mean? Like Karis's role is different from Jetty's role, who's different from Ricky's role, but they all know what their role is, and they just have to play to the standard of their role and how they help contribute to this team.
And again, Sam, that's going to be hugely important for the younger Cavs. They're, don't come out with an S on your chest. It's a C. Go out and do what you do.
Yeah, right. And that's, you've got to do what you do and do it, be productive in it. We talk about how Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and Isaac Okoro, this is their first taste of the playoffs. Well, the same could be said about, Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens. Jetty has played, I looked it up, 56 minutes total of playoff action, which was when his first season, the 2017-18 season when they went to the finals. So, there's not a whole lot of playoff experience off the bench. Obviously, Ricky Rubio and Danny Green, a different story. Now, you don't know how much they're going to be able to contribute or what they will contribute or how many minutes those 2 veterans will get. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs rely on them heavily off the bench. Karis LeVert, just one playoff series, but no concerns there. He's been extremely productive since about February 1st. Has been very good. So the concerns are kind of the rest of the guys. Are they going to be consistent? And again, you don't have to be Superman, but you do have to know your role and play it well. Because a lot of times in a series, in a 4-5 matchup, the star players are going to do what they do. The rest of the series comes down to what the reserves can do.
Yeah, agree with you wholeheartedly. When you're watching game one, if you see this, you're thinking things are going pretty well for the Cavs. If you see this, it's like, ooh, this is not what you want to see. So what you want to see, what you don't want to see as you're watching this series.
Well, what you want to see first and foremost, is the defense continue to play like it has this year and be able to contain the Knicks, because really in the playoffs, that's what it is. It's a lot of, the game slows down a little bit, gets more physical. You got to be able to protect the basket. The good news is the Cavs have two guys in Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, who are two of the best in the entire NBA at that. So if they continue to defend like they've defended during the regular season, I think that's a very good sign moving forward for their first postseason without LeBron James in 25 years. So I think that would be something very promising. What you don't want to see is a lot of turnovers. Those will really come back and haunt you and remove you from a series very quickly, not taking care of the basketball, because every possession in the playoffs matters. And if you're losing the ball with unforced errors or, just being loose with the basketball, that's going to cause all kinds of problems in the long run.
Sam Amico from hoopswire.com and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll continue talking Knicks Cavs on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Cavs with Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. This one from the Bleacher Report. 5 players ready to shine in their first NBA playoffs. And a couple of the Cavs are on this list. Darius Garland is a 6'1 hooper, non-elite explosive. Garland uses skills and smarts to dismantle opposing defenses. Already belongs on the league's short list of tough covers. Too good of a shooter to leave any breathing room. From deep, too slippery off the bounce to crowd him. Evan Mobley. The story with Mobley is defense. If he stays healthy and on his current trajectory, he should probably start clearing spaces for multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards he will be collecting down the line. We'll get to Mobley in a minute, Sam. There's something else I would do before we talk about Mobley. Garland's a guy that, to my way of thinking, he's one of the elite guys that maybe got overshadowed a little bit because of Donovan Mitchell. And if he goes out and plays the way he's capable of playing, it's his time to shine.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head there with Garland. He's almost kind of a forgotten guy, but he's a forgotten guy who's, putting up 20 points, 10 assists most nights. So it's nice to have that kind of guy who's not getting all the ink just because Donovan Mitchell's having such a fantastic season and Evan Mobley has been rising so much since the second part of the year. But without question, Darius Garland is a huge key to everything the Cavs are hoping to accomplish in the playoffs. And it's very true. He's just gone under the radar in so many instances. And with so much of the attention going to be on Mitchell for the Knicks, this is going to open things up for Garland. And that's why you went out and got a guy like Mitchell, because you already had a really good player in Garland. And now if you focus too much on Mitchell, it's going to be a problem for the Knicks because Darius Garland's there as well.
So on the topic of Evan Mobley, take a listen to Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo on the Bill Simmons podcast talking about their pick this year for Defensive Player of the Year.
They have Mitchell and Garland as their guards.
Yep.
And Allen as the rim protector. But what they really need in any switch or whatever, somebody who could just guard anybody, right? In any sort of switch pick and roll. And that was the thing that over and over again, like there's some good stats with Mobley, He was first in contested three-pointers per game, 3.6. He was third in most contested shots, 11.5, trailed just Lopez and Nick Claxton. He was first in defensive win shares. He was fifth in switching when defending screens and pick and rolls. He was ninth in guarding isolations. He was top 20 field goal percentage at the rim. He played big minutes. He played 35 minutes a game. He played 2,715 minutes for the season. He was in the lineup all year. And I just thought he was the most important defensive player. If Jaren Jackson had played 10 more games, fine. The way to pick apart the Mobley case is the per possession on-off. There's some on-off stuff, and you can get, you can nick him for. But he kind of had to play backup center for them, which I don't think he's big enough to do. And if you look at the lineups where he got to play with Allen, the stats are really good. And yeah, they dropped when he had to be the center on these smaller lineups, but they probably should have kind of held the fort. I don't know. I thought he was the most important guy that I saw this year, and that was the top 5 team.
And Sam, the point he made about him playing center when Allen was out might end up costing him Defensive Player of the Year this year because it did knock down his metrics. But anybody that's seen him, he does whatever you need him to do defensively. I mean, it's truly scary that he's that young.
Yeah, I mean, look, anybody's going to benefit from having a Jared Allen with him, and then he can play power forward. Mobley can, and just all of a sudden, when you're without Jared Allen, you're going from defending the opposing center and power forward, or just the power forward to the center and power forward. So it made it tough for Mobley, understandably so, especially being a young player. They didn't really have another defensive anchor in the front court to help him out when Allen was down. But those two together, just having Allen back there has made Mobley even that much more of a force when it comes to protecting the basket, because he can just focus on his guy and the guards, who are opposing guards who are driving to the basket. So it's been nothing but up on the up and up for Mobley since really the middle of January. He was good before that, and he never really took much of a step back defensively, even when Allen went down. It was just slightly noticeable. Bill Simmons used a good word there. You could nick him for that because his Mobley stats, because they went down a little bit. But no, I mean, just the fact that you have two big guys and giving you the old kind of Twin Towers look to the opposing teams with Allen back there. And they work together pretty well offensively as well, Allen and Mobley. So it really will help Mobley having a healthy Allen in the playoffs, just because they work so well together and understand each other at both ends of the court.
Yeah, and along those lines, J.B. Bickerstaff talked about what makes the Cavs half-court offense go.
We have individual players, who can create for themselves, and we also have big guys who can, finish, but also create. And I think that's not, a common thing in the half court, to have a guy like Evan and Jarrett who can play make from the pocket like they can and play big-to-big basketball. I think it's well celebrated, Donovan and Darius' ability to score. But like when you watch those two guys operate together, there's not a lot of teams that play that way. And, that makes us effective in small spaces and them efficient at the rim.
And Sam, that's in a playoff series. If they can find a way to get those two involved like they play off of each other, good luck defending that.
Yeah, you already have a handful, with Mitchell and Garland, and then you throw in Mobley and Allen, and they get going. That's why the Cavs are the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, and considered the team to beat in the East for years to come, because they just have so many weapons, and when they're clicking, they're really unstoppable because they have so many weapons, and then they're doing it at the defensive end. It's a very promising sign. The fear, of course, in all of this is, playoffs are a different animal. How do guys who have never been there before, how do they respond? Sometimes they respond great. sometimes they step up their games. Young guys do in the playoffs. That's happened for years, but we've also seen it go the other way where, it just doesn't work out because it's a whole new ball game. It gets more physical for the big guys, even the guards a little bit, and takes players out of their game. So, that's the interesting thing about this series is, we're really not going to know until we see it happen. There are so many other series that you could kind of predict, these guys are going to be ready because they've been to the playoffs before. The Cavs, not so much. The Knicks even a little bit too, but the Cavs especially because their core, the majority of their core has so little playoff experience. But like I said, get two of those guys going, Mobley and Allen, along with Garland and Mitchell, going to be hard to beat.
Sam Amico, hoopswire.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, Dave, thanks for having me. We will talk to you soon.
As always, great stuff. Make sure you check out Sam Amico, hoopswire.com. Everything NBA, especially good stuff with the Cavs and the upcoming series against the Knicks. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.